Okay, so this is a tour of the Second Life estate that we have at UWE. Our estate is made up of 3 islands. Is that running? Yes, it is. It's made up of 3 islands. This is me standing on what's called Innovation Island. Innovation Island is the home of the MA, and we're going to take a balloon ride in a moment. One of the reasons why it looks like well, there's 2 reasons why it looks like a port. One is because we're in Bristol, and Bristol is a port. But the other reason is that the students who attend the MA attend it entirely virtually. So it's entirely run in Second Life. It's a 2-year master's program looking at education in virtual worlds, run entirely in a virtual world. So they're all over the world. We have students, a lot in the UK, but we have them in New Zealand, Saudi Arabia, Germany, Canada, America, and Argentina at the moment. So you can imagine that one of the first problems that we hit is timetabling and trying to get that worked out with time zones, which is sort of quite eye-rubbing it for some of our students and for some of us as well. But the other reason we made it look like a port is because students come from all over the world to there. So it's like arriving at a port and working together and doing things and travelling all over the place together, and then we come back to the port and say bye-bye and meet again the next week. The way it runs, the modules are 15 credits each, for those of you who are into this kind of thing. They cover a range of topic areas, and for each of the attended modules there is 3 hours per week over 12 weeks of attendance in a virtual world. So a part-time student going through the course will spend 6 hours a week in a virtual world in tutorials. So it's very immersive for them, it's very immersive for us as well as tutors, and also what I'm trying to do in the university is to kind of bring on some of my colleagues who are tutors in particular subject areas to get them used to these kinds of technologies. And it's a steep learning curve, I think, for them as well. What you can see at the moment it's going past is the library, underneath and to the right. It's moving over towards a second of the 2 kind of conference theatres that we've got, although we tend not to use them in that format. You can see a set of circular chairs at the top of that, and we tend to use it much more in tutorial format if we're there. As it goes round the corner, you'll be able to see the pub. Really important that we had a pub. And there's a beer garden at the back of it that goes down to a beach. We use that a lot. We use that a lot for the social side of the course. We run joint parties with universities that have students in Second Life in America. We've had a Halloween party with Washington State in October. It's great. If you've never danced in Second Life, you've missed something. Dancing in Second Life entirely changes your view of the virtual world. I think for a couple of reasons. One is that you're moving, and the other is that music is involved. And I'm going to come on to that, music and soundscapes, later on, because that's one of my real interests now. I want to start really starting to do some research into the use of music and soundscapes in these kinds of environments. It's very under-researched, very little understood, I think. What you can see below the balloon now, on the left-hand side, is the sandbox. That's where the students build. They build a lot of things in this course. They design a lot of learning environments. That's partly what it's about. They study curriculum design in virtual worlds like this. I'll say they study it. It kind of emerges as we go through the module, hopefully. I'm very much into what Maggie was saying, into emergent curricula and emergent learning. So the course does have a fixed curriculum because I couldn't get it through the validation at UWE. Without that, God bless them, like every other university, it has to have a week-by-week syllabus. So it's exactly what we're going to do on these weeks. So I've got to do that to get it validated. That isn't the way the course runs. We do have a sense of what happens week by week, but it's much more emergent than that. So they study scripting and building in one entire module. They study simulations and role play in another one. And in fact, the first year students have just gone through a role play over the last 3 weeks, and they're starting to deconstruct that just now. They then go on to study the sociology of virtual worlds and the philosophy of virtual worlds, and that module is running at the moment for our current second year students who are going through for the first time last year, and that's turning into my favourite module. That is just mind-blowing when you have philosophers who are not into virtual worlds particularly coming to talk to us about Plato, about Freud, about Kant, about Foucault, about a whole range of philosophers, and then you can hear in their voices as they're talking, and we're explaining about virtual worlds, and the students are all getting into this real community, you can hear them saying, oh, I've never thought about it like that, and taking it back out into philosophy again. Do virtual worlds if you look at Freud, do virtual worlds enable us to suspend the superego? So is the judge gone when we go online? Is that why people behave sometimes differently? That's what Freud would say. Freud would fall over if he saw these. My favourite one is Plato. I've spoken and written quite a bit about this, and the notion of metaxis. To the Greeks, the idea of being in two places at the same time was absolutely fine. They were in the divine and they were in the mundane at the same time. So the notion of being suspended between two worlds or having a foot in two worlds was not a problem to the Greeks. As we moved on and time moved on and we moved away from Greek philosophy, it has become more of a problem for us simply because of the worldview we have. If we go back to thinking about liminal spaces, Maggie and I have written about this, about liminal spaces and metaxis spaces and ideas about metaxis, then the notion of that question, somebody mentioned it at lunchtime, so where are you when you're here? Well, I'm in both places. I am what one of my students calls the meat sack, is sitting behind his desk in Auckland in New Zealand, but he, as far as he is concerned, the essence of he is with us in the virtual world. And he's fine with that, and so are we. So we don't tax ourselves about where we are and whether we're more here or more there. We're in several places at the same time. We've gone through many ways of trying to induct our students on the MA, and not just our students, but a lot of students at UE now use these technologies in a range of subjects, which I'll mention in a moment. We've looked at ways of inducting them into Second Life. We've tried mazes where they talk to parrots and walk around and jump over things. And when we looked at it, we thought, well, actually, the things they really need to do are to be able to move backwards and forwards, run a bit, fly, and chat to each other, and change what they look like, because that's the first thing everybody does in the virtual world, is change their avatar. So here we've got our induction is actually a game of football. There's no real induction in the sense of the students having to follow a particular track. They just play a game of football, and it's actually a really good experience for how you move around, particularly using the forwards and backwards and side-to-side keys. I'm not very good at it, as you can see. We had a Doctor Who versus the Daleks football game set up in Second Life for a group of 14 to 15-year-olds who visited us last year in Science and Engineering Week. And they had great fun playing around in this kind of environment. It's another thing that we stress on the MA, and we stress very much in all our work in virtual worlds, is this is a load of fun. If you let yourself go, it's a load of fun, and that's brilliant. That's exactly what it should be. It should be a load of fun. It shouldn't be a difficult thing that we have to do, or a serious thing that we have to do, because it's education. It's a load of fun. Here is an example of some work that our students designed in sociology. They were asked by our sociology students on their course, tutors on their course, to design a building that would make people think about how society has changed in the last 200 to 250 years. And so they came up with the idea of a kind of gallery that you would walk through, and they wanted to choose particular topics or subjects or senses that they felt would give the sense of that era. It's noticeable that when you get into the First and Second World War era, almost all the pictures they chose are black and white, and everything else is very colourful. So in their minds, that era was a very kind of dark and monochromatic sort of era. And it goes straight through up into the modern day, and then, as you'll see in a moment, you can walk out into a Greek amphitheatre where you can hold debates and so on. But the amount of work the students had to do and the way they had to think in order to do this was a really interesting piece of work. And I think they've come up with a great first start at this, because what we now want to do, and they want to do, is add more interactivity so you can go to some of these places. So, you know, because we know you can go to the Western Front in World War I. Oxford University run a wonderful sim, because they're the holders of the World War I poetry archive. And they now enable people to interact with that poetry actually in the trenches, so you can get your uniform on and things explode around you and so on. So it's a wonderful sim. So yeah, there's lots of different places where we can talk, lots of different places where we can discuss things. The students on the MA also study artificial intelligence and bots and non-player characters. There's one module. And I've missed one out. Did you say research methods? Yeah, I think I missed one out. And then they do a dissertation or an extended project. It's up to them. They don't have to do a traditional dissertation. They can do a very extended, large, virtual world project, because some of our students are not educators, they're more developers and more interested in that end of things. So this is an example of some of the things that we do with other departments in the university as well. In the Education Innovation Centre, we point in two directions. We have a very important remit that points in towards the university to help to develop staff usage of technology, innovation in education, and part of my team is largely dedicated to doing that. And this is work that we did, is HEA funded work that we did with our psychology department. What you saw just there, the Holistic Pastures Psychology Counselling Suite, is an entirely artificial intelligence run psychological counselling suite. Our psychology students can go in, pick up their remit from the director of that particular counselling suite, and it gives them directions to, first of all, to go and watch an example counselling between two bots. One's a counsellor, one's a patient, and then their patient will be waiting in the next room, and their patient is an artificial agent. So they come out of one room, having seen that, and go into the other, and they do a half-hour interview with their patient, and their job is to diagnose the problem that that patient has. We have a bot with OCD, we have a bot with anxiety disorders, and we've got another one, I can't quite remember now, with a diagnosable set of illnesses as well. After that, they then come out, sit at a computer in Second Life, and they write their report. That report, because it's a web prim, then just goes straight through to the tutor, who can then mark all of those. Beauty of it, of course, is that we can enable students to do these things at any time, day or night, and large numbers can do this, because scalability is often an issue in virtual worlds, because we can stagger it over the course of a module. What I'm just coming out of here now is the Dragon's Den. That was another thing that HEA very kindly funded for us. The idea there is that the students can pitch ideas to dragons, and the Dragon's Den actually works. There are 4 chairs with scripts, so that when you sit on them, click on the table, you can then bid in or out, you can bid certain amounts of money. The students on the MA currently use that to bid their ideas for their formative ideas for their summative assessments, and we tell them how much we like it by how much we bid. What I'm going to do with the dissertation students, who the first lot will just be coming through to start their dissertations in May, is put some Linden dollars aside, and they can bid ideas for their dissertation, and if we like it, then we'll fund them to a certain extent, because you need money in Second Life. You're going to do some of the things they want to do. And the better their idea, the more money we'll give them. Of course, we all turn up as dragons, because we can't resist it. Not even with a dragon on my shoulder, as I did at Slang Witches a couple of weeks ago, but actually as a dragon, a full dragon, because we can't stop ourselves. The other thing to say about the 3 islands that we have is that we also are neighbours with 2 other islands. We have agreements with Western College, Western Further Education College, and with Birmingham University to share what we do. So when they created their islands, they popped them next to ours. And so we're starting to build a kind of community of practice, hopefully. I was just walking past somebody just now who said community of practice, and we haven't got one. I don't know who it was. But you're right, it's difficult. Well, it's not as difficult. It's not been very effectively done necessarily to have a good community of practice in virtual worlds. Drum circles we like a lot. So we're going to try and do that, and they own their islands. We have no ownership over them, but we have bridges between them. We have agreements that we can use and our students can use what they do, and their students can use what we do. We also use other people's stuff, and Paul and his team and the genetics laboratory is fantastic, because last 2 years 30 to 40 of our genetics students now, as a matter of course, use the Leicester Genetics Lab as a primer before they start working in their real world labs. Wonderful. It's fantastic to be able to have that. So thanks to Paul again for letting us use that. So we have the psychology students, we have the biosciences students. As we speak at the moment, 12 students are just piloting a forensics crime room scene that their tutors just put up on our island. We have a forensics undergraduate course, and they use a real house which they dress up as a crime scene. It's great, it's brilliant, it's expensive and it's time consuming. You can only get a certain number of students through there at the time. So what the tutor has now done, and we've been helping her to do this, is she's built a murder room in Second Life, and so the students can do a complete forensics simulation in that murder room. And of course, picking up on the hologram idea, exactly, the holodeck idea, exactly it. We pack those into boxes, virtual boxes, and so in the one space we can have any number of different rooms that we just pop out depending on what students want to do. And that's my cat, Schrodinger, my pussy cat. Actually, I've got rid of him now, and I've got another one. I'm horrible. No, he's packed away in my inventory. He's not dead. He's just, that's why he's Schrodinger. Is he alive or is he dead? No, he's in my inventory. So where does that which is why it's called Schrodi. So what I want Schrodi to be able to do is, he's an AI bot, and what I want him to be able to do is to learn from the discussions that we have in what's called the ivory tower, which is one of the areas we have, which is a kind of very academic, big leather chairs, Oxford-y kind of environment. We just like to do that sometimes. Schrodi lives on a little cushion in there. He's a Pandora bot at the minute, so he's a bit dim. And I'm working on AML and other things to try and get him to learn from the discussions that go on in there. Because what I would like to do is to have a kind of virtual agent that is beginning to learn from what we're doing. And then maybe they can just ask Schrodi every now and again. Or maybe it just pops up when the conversation gets interesting and says, you know, I think this. Or, I think we're probably way off doing that yet, but it's something that we want to do. So that's a kind of a very quick background to our activities in virtual worlds. We have probably hundreds of students actually using virtual worlds every year now, which is wonderful in UWE. We have finance audit students who do a complete financial audit in a soap opera kind of place in virtual world, in Second Life. We have a whole new law facility about to be built, which will enable students to take a law case through all the different courts physically. And the next big thing we want to do is start joining up students in different disciplines to work together on simulations. So we, for example, what I want to talk about in a minute is some simulation work I did with environmental health students, and they did a complete accident investigation in World. And they've done it for 3 years with the MSc environmental health students. What I want to do is, because at the end of that simulation they have to decide what they're going to do. Are they going to prosecute somebody or serve a notice or do nothing? So I want them to decide what to do, and then I want that to go to court. I want the law students to be then the students who either defend or otherwise that particular case. I want the business students to play the part of the organisation where this happened, their managers. So we can start to connect together a whole range of different kinds of subject matter, and students who in their real world will work together. They will start to work with lawyers and managers and so on. My colleague Micah is texting away there. That's Mari-Carmen Guilotega, who is my colleague on the course and is the senior lecturer in virtual worlds on my team. So and we have tutors in Greece and in Belgium as well as in the UK as well. So the students and the tutors can be anywhere. So the thing I was going to focus down on, bye Maggie, the thing I was going to focus down on is situated learning. Just to talk a bit about, how do I move the slides on? Let's just click that bottom thingy. Okay. Like I say, I use a Mac, but not. Is about situated learning and experiential learning. And just to talk a little bit about some of the things that we've found from some of the research work that we've done with students using these kinds of technologies, particularly for simulations. My interest, as I say, is in experiential and situated learning. We all know about Cole and his definition of experiential learning being the process whereby knowledge is created through the transformation of experience. I mentioned that to somebody I was just having a chat with over lunch, and about how experiential these environments are, how hard it is, because I try to do this with our directorate on an almost monthly basis, to get them to understand what it is we're doing and what the technologies are that we're using. And I keep saying, I can tell you until I'm blue in the face, but you have got to get in there and experience it. These environments are utterly and absolutely experiential. And in order to understand them, even if you don't immerse, like we were saying before, what's immersion, and to what extent do you have to be immersed? Even if you don't immerse, if you don't experience, it's extremely hard to understand what we're going on about. So, knowledge results from the combination of grasping and transforming experiences, I keep saying to the VC, and he keeps ignoring me. And situated learning, again, is defined by Levy and Wenger, as we know, as learning that takes place in the same context in which it's applied. So, for us, or for situated learning, there are three main kind of areas we tend to be interested in situated learning. The first one of those is socialisation. And we've talked a lot about that, I think, up until now in the course of today, what important arenas these are for forms of socialisation. One thing that I would say about the way the MA students, certainly, and also other students that I've worked with who use these environments, the way in which they socialise, the way in which the group sticks together, is a large part about shared experience. They can have shared experiences in there that we can't enable them to share any other way. So we're all sharing experience now, we're sitting in a room. But with students in virtual worlds, they can share dancing, playing music, going to the Great Pyramid, going to the World War I front, Western Front, a whole range of different experiences, which for the students are real experiences. And those experiences gel the groups together really well. The second issue for situated learning is visualization, and of course that is obviously an enormous benefit from virtual worlds. I'm just now hopefully going to show you a video that was shot by, I know her as Letty Pinar, but it's Chris Schneider, who I think will probably be in the chat. Are you there? Are you there, Chris, in the chat? Yeah, great. So Letty's one of the students on the MA, Chris is one of the students on the MA, and she shot this video on Monday, excuse me, where the students had a go at being taken up in a tornado. So I'll just show you what we did. We were talking about simulations and about visualizations. I'm hoping this is going to work. Yes, it does. Can I turn the sound on at all, Gary, on this one? Sorry, it makes a funny noise, doesn't it? So I don't want to turn that one off. And the third issue in relation to situated learning is about imitation. It's about trying to do the things or being able to do the things that you're learning about, so actually having a go at these things. That picture is one of the simulations that we have on the island, which is a risk assessment in a boat hire premises, and the environmental health students actually undertake an actual risk assessment. So there are some wires they can trip over, and there are things that don't work properly on machines, the guards don't work properly, and so on. So all of those issues, I think, are dealt with very well by virtual worlds. So what we did was to do some evaluative research over the 3 years, probably about 50 or 60 students that went through the environmental health accident investigation. And what I was interested in doing was narrowing down, because particularly visualization and imitation are about authenticity, and somebody mentioned it earlier on this morning about being authentic. And I got really interested in this notion about what makes these kinds of environments authentic and what doesn't, and what might we need to look at further in the sense of authenticity and situated learning. So we did some research with those students, and we found 13 factors that affected authenticity, and they're actually in a paper in the Journal of Interactive Learning Research if you want to take a look at that. We found 9 of those factors were positive and 4 of them were negative. So in the sunny cloud are things like the students saying that it encouraged them to learn actively, that they were able to do things, that because they had, I mean, these were students, master's students, and a few of them just off their own bat said, I'm fed up with sitting in rooms learning, fed up with it. And so, and what happens in their heads when they sit down in a room is they just now switch off because they got so used to doing it that it's very hard to concentrate. So the activity part of it was really good. The idea of facilitation, of facilitating their learning rather than absolutely directing it, rather than me saying, you must know 1, 2, 3 and 4. That we said, you need to know about how to investigate an accident. We've told you some of the theory and you've read about some bits of it. Now we want to facilitate you being able to do it. So that sense was something that they felt. And they felt that that helped the authenticity, gave them a sense that it was real. They felt very engaged, and they felt that whatever we do has to be engaging for authenticity. If it's a bit boring and ordinary, then it's not going to work either. They felt socialization was important because they will talk to people in the real world and they will act with other people in the real world. And this is one that came out that, well, it pleasantly surprised me, that it's the generalizability. What the students did for themselves, and I didn't really think about them doing this at the time, was that they started to imagine the setup that we had for the accident investigation, which was a warehouse, as being a location for other things that they were learning on the rest of their course, which weren't to do with anything that I was teaching, nothing to do with risk. But because they had a location to put it in, they started thinking, well, it was Grive distribution, because my old boss who funded it was called Steve Grive. And they started to think, what would this look like in Grive distribution? Now, that was not something that we even asked them to think about. But they reckoned that generalizability outwards from the specific simulation they're doing to other things, again, gave them this sense of authenticity, because they were going backwards and forwards, really, between the virtual and the real in terms of what they were thinking about it. They liked the notion of presence, they felt present, and they also felt, for authenticity's sake, it's a really good way to feel some kind of authority, but in a safe space. So they can be authoritative. They interviewed me as the manager of the, in a different avatar skin, so they didn't know who it was, at one point in the simulation. And it's amazing, some of them came in suits, they dressed their avatar especially in suits. Some of them came in just looking as they normally did, and one guy went to a lot of bother to find a clipboard and a white coat, and actually came in with his clipboard, because that's what he would do as an environmental health officer. So the sense he had of that authority, that sense that when I qualify, I'm going to be working in a position where I enforce the law, I can practice doing that in this environment, and they really enjoyed that. Comparative reality refers to us asking them about doing role plays and simulations traditionally in classrooms and some of the work that they've done in virtual worlds, and they felt that comparatively the reality of, even though they know they use the word fake world a lot, they use the word fake a lot, even though it's a fake world, it felt like a real thing to do. And I think it's been mentioned several times, it's not so much that you make the environment absolutely believable, it's that you make the whole thing believable, because the brain fills in the bits of the gaps. So we didn't have to put pallets on every single rack in the warehouse. We just had to give them the feel of being there. Once we did that, then their minds filled in the rest. They liked the visual realism, and they felt that visual realism, although it doesn't need to be exact, it needs to be realistic enough to be able to be authentic. And they loved the idea that enabled them to learn from mistakes. They liked that safe space sort of notion. The 4 things they didn't like, and they felt probably were anti-authenticity, were, first of all, they were worried about the public image of virtual worlds. And the fact that virtual worlds can have a bit of a, well, they started out, as somebody said this morning, this rather geeky kind of, people getting married and divorced and living their lives in virtual worlds. It was all a bit odd. And then once the Daily Mail got bored of it, we can all start to use these things for what they're good at. But they were still a bit worried about that public image. They didn't like that. That was the major thing that took away from a sense of authenticity, was dislocation from tactile senses. They couldn't touch anything. They couldn't pick anything up. They couldn't feel that connection. They couldn't smell anything. Environmental health officers, particularly when they're doing food inspections, and we do food inspections with them now as well, rely on their sense of smell a lot, and you can't do that in the virtual world. Some of them felt there was a lack of naturalism. They didn't mean that in the sense of the visual realism. They just felt it wasn't natural. And they couldn't put it any more than that. It doesn't feel authentic because it doesn't feel natural. It doesn't feel like I'm really there. So maybe there is an immersion issue in that as well. And the last one was some of them felt, and there's a direct correlation between the gamers, so direct correlation between the gamers and the people who felt the graphics were unrealistic. Majority of them thought, yeah, actually the realism's quite good, and I don't mind, I'll fill in the bits that aren't there. The gamers, what I play World of Warcraft, and you can see the whites of his eyes, and you know. So there was that kind of expectation thing. I think it was Uncanny Valley, Enrique, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Interesting place, the Uncanny Valley. Okay, so just the last slide is this one, which is I've used quite a lot. I did an unscientific researchy thing as well as doing all the scientific researchy things you're meant to do with all the data, and I just shoved it into a word cloud. And this is all the students' responses, their verbal, qualitative responses. And I haven't done anything to this. That's what came out, like real life. And I didn't manipulate it. And when you look at the scientific sort of analysis that I did as well, that's pretty much what they said. It felt like real life. We know it's not, but it feels like it. So as long as it feels like it, to us it feels like we're in the situation, and that I think is what, in terms of situated learning, we're kind of striving for, to make it feel like that, not necessarily replicate something.